Hello and welcome to Default Assault, where we take on everything by default, and it's Endgame weekend, so of course we're going to be taking on the Endgame, Avengers Endgame, the big conclusion to 11 years of film. Joining me today is Mr. TJ. How's it going, TJ?
Feeling good, man. Been waiting on this day now. It seems like 10 years. So now that we're here, I don't even know how to act. I got to go see it again.
Of course. I kind of feel like I need to see it again before I can really give my definitive thoughts. But before we jump into spoilers, and this is one of those films where I feel like you really can't talk about it or really do it any justice without jumping into spoilers. Let's face it, you've all probably seen this. If you're tuning in, you've probably already seen it. But just very vaguely, what were your thoughts on the film?
Very vaguely, I can say it was 3 hours.
Yeah.
And while I know I was there for 3 hours because I'm getting old and I felt it whenever I was standing up, I can say that it was a good 3 hours. And this is the first time I ever went to see a movie without my wife. But the theater was packed. So what I'm saying is this is the first time I've sat next to someone else and watched the movie, and he was a very pleasant man.
Oh. Now, did you hold hands and cry together, or?
No. But my eyes did get a little moist in there once or twice. We'll talk about that. But no. It was overall. First off, the crowd was great because it could have been a bad experience. But no, the movie itself, it was 3 hours, and I enjoyed the entire time.
That's why I picked a theater that has big leather reclining seats. So it didn't really bother me. I don't mind very long movies as long as there's a point for them being long. Over here, I think they earned the 3 hour runtime. There's some parts at the beginning that could have been cropped a little bit, but it didn't. The runtime didn't bother me in the least bit. I enjoyed the film. I have some reservations about a couple of things here and there, which we'll get to in the spoiler section. But overall, I did want to address. Did you prefer it to Infinity War, or do you like this? Do you think that was a stronger film?
It's tough because I liked both films. Like I think I've seen Infinity War now probably about 20 or 25 times in the last year because I just liked the movie. And I like the way that they did it. You know, Infinity War, and I'm going to say something a little bit later with regards to the action scenes. But the movies, in my opinion, was laid out perfectly.
Mm. Yeah, I think that Infinity War was a little bit more streamlined. Some of the issues I had with Infinity War, especially towards the ending battle scene, which was very reminiscent of a battle scene we already saw in Black Panther. I didn't have that issue in this film. A lot of it felt very fresh. So overall, I think that I walked away with a fresher feeling, despite the fact that I was sitting in one spot for 3 hours, reclining couch. Or not. Any thoughts you have before we jump into spoilers? I'm kind of aching to do that.
No. I'm definitely ready to get into those spoilers as well. But if I can get one last thing to Infinity War, I'm going to ask you this question. When you watch Infinity War, right, and Thanos sacrifices Gamora for the Soul Stone, do you notice anything else where she fell?
Did I notice anything else when she fell?
Like when they show her body laying down there, like did you notice anything else on that surface?
I think I know where you're getting at.
Yep.
Not that much.
I have to go back and watch it again, specifically that scene, and we can get into that when we get into spoilers. But at first glance, when I was watching it live yesterday, I remembered seeing something there when I saw Gamora, which just adds to more of the storyline with regards to what happened and how it happened. But yeah, I'm interested to get your opinion on that.
I will admit it was the strangest Howard the Duck cameo I ever saw, but kind of broke the moment. Oh wait, we're talking about something different. Oh, sorry. All right. Spoilers. Kyle isn't here to say his usual spoilers, bitches line, but this is that requisite moment. I'll give you guys a few seconds to tune out. Make sure you tune back in though after you see it and watch to see if you agree with us or you disagree. Anyway, okay, officially in spoiler section.
Spoilers, bitches.
Yeah, yay! You do a pretty good rendition of that. See, give us a full Kyle Nash rendition of spoilers.
All right, now everybody, get ready now. Not for nothing, not for nothing. Spoilers, bitches.
I just got a tingle in the back of my neck. It was absolutely gorgeous, beautiful. So let's break it down. Now, what did you like most about this film, and what didn't you like about this film?
So, what I like, they did a good job of telling the story of 10 years, man. This movie was not just the sequel to Infinity War, or it really was an ending for these characters. And if they choose to, and granted, with some of them, they still have the ability to bring them back in later if they choose to, or have cameos or reference them at some point in time. But it was a story ending for a lot of characters. One thing I can say, if I have to say that I didn't like anything, and I'm having a hard time. I can continue to think, but I'm having a hard time. I didn't have a lot of issue with the film at all. The story was, granted, anytime you're knocking, you're bringing in time travel, you really have the potential to do it bad or great. And what they did was they pointed out every freaking movie that we've seen time travel in and said it's all bullshit. Like, I absolutely love that, man. So
I like the fact that they kept referencing Back to the Future. That was
Back to the Future. Like, Back to the Future is just bullshit.
And Die Hard, of course. But
right, because Die Hard came out of the blue, and I promise, Demos, when I heard that line, I thought about us, because we're sitting here just a couple weeks ago talking about Hawkeye getting his own show, and I bring up Nakatomi Plaza because Hawkeye is everyman. And then all of a sudden, I hear Die Hard and Endgame, and I personally felt like it was because of me.
I demand royalties. I demand royalties. Thanos demands your royalties. I see the time travel, going into it, I think everybody pretty much guessed that some sort of time travel will be involved. I like how they did it, though. That's not, this isn't a story where the characters that we follow, they're going to be erased from existence to save an earlier timeline or so forth. No, they kind of, they kept certain consequences still at play, and I like that. That was a little bit refreshing. Although as much as they tried to point out that they were, we know where all these other movies went wrong, we're gonna close all those plot holes. No, there are enough plot holes left over that I think are gonna drive enough people insane, especially when characters from the past start getting involved with the action at play in the present, and they just they meet their fates. And now what about all those other alternate threads that were just created? You could drive yourself crazy. I think the film earned enough goodwill for you to try to overlook some of that, especially if I'm looking at this. You're right. It kind of lives up to its title. It's the end game. For me, honestly, this is a strange takeaway. But I felt like this is kind of like the last film. Like I'm almost kind of bummed that there are more films coming out after this. In a way, I'm like, you just closed it out. It's kind of nice. I see that you left a few threads here for characters to move on, but
Sure.
I'm not as interested anymore. In a way,
You're not wrong for that at all. And I say it's a generational thing because we're talking about 10 years. But this was our series, because I consider you and I to be in the same age range.
We're the same age, TJ.
Yeah, I didn't know if we were the same age or not. I just knew. I thought I was old as hell. I just knew I was younger than Kyle. But but I think this was our movie. This was our series going, 10 years ago, coming up to now, seeing, was it 23 films over the course of that time span? This was for us. And I think the next phase is for my kids. I won't be as invested. I can't see myself being as invested in the next one because I have been terribly invested in this one, and it was all rewarded yesterday. I've never clapped at the end of a movie, even though I wasn't necessarily standing up doing an ovation. I did, do a little golfer's clap for that one because I thought it was very well done.
And speaking of reactions, there were a few moments in the film that sparked audience reaction for me. Not probably. I was actually kind of surprised. This wasn't the loudest audience I've ever been in a big epic opening weekend theater with. They were a little bit more reserved, but I do remember specific moments where everybody cheered and went nuts, or even the inverse. Everybody started groaning. The biggest cheer. The two biggest moments that people cheered were the big Cap moment where he finally wields the hammer. I knew it! I think we all kind of saw that was coming, especially when Thor goes back in time and takes the hammer. You're like, okay, well, they're setting that up.
Right.
They're setting it up. If it would have been Captain Marvel that picked it up and said, the entire theater would have erupted. People would have died. Theater screens would have been torn to shreds. Chaos. Anyway,
chaos ensues.
Captain America wields the hammer, and the other biggest was they did this Star Trek 6-esque closing montage of the original 6 Avengers, where they had their signatures and their titles come up. When Robert Downey Jr.'s name came up, everybody cheered. They went nuts. The biggest groan I got in the theater was during the. And this was kind of, in truth, it was very clumsily handled. The big girl power moment where suddenly all the female Avengers coalesce to this one point so they can have their one moment and then charge and accomplish nothing. But nevertheless, my entire theater, I heard more women in my theater groaning. Guys.
I don't see, and that's the thing, man. All right, so first off, I'll let you know. The biggest crowd reaction here, and it's hilarious that it is like this, because I was, and again, Demos, I promise I'm not trying to make a big deal about this, but I was one of maybe 10 people that looked like me in the theater, right?
Oh, yeah. You're right. That moment did spark a few cheers in my theater, too.
When Black Panther came out, there were so many people that went crazy. And I'm not just talking about folks that look like me. Like, I'm like, wow, like people really liked Black Panther. And I don't know if it was more for T'Challa or for Shuri. But whenever she came out, like people really got excited. The fact that he didn't have a line other than, the fight and chant getting everybody ready. I mean, there was that crowd reaction. But to your point about the girl power really quickly, there were no groans for it in my theater. I can say that the crowd that I got, and maybe this goes to yours as well, you saying they were a little bit more subdued. I think this movie has warranted a little bit more respect from audiences than we've gotten. Now, granted, people with spoilers have been real douchebags going and changing their PlayStation IPs to spoil the movie for others, but in the theater,
I've had to delete a few comments, especially on Instagram. Thankfully, I saw the movie before I saw the spoiler comments. But just that one line, at this point we're in spoilers. I can say what that line is. People kept posting, Iron Man dies. I'm like, thanks, douchebag.
Right. Like I just, and seeing it yesterday, seeing it so early yesterday, I wanted to talk about it, like right when I saw it. And I had nobody to talk to.
You could have talked to me.
I couldn't. You hadn't seen it yet.
I saw it about the same time you did.
Oh, you did? I thought you were going after I did. So
like an hour after.
Got you. But no, so it is one of those movies that people are going to talk about. And this is going to be the movie of the year. And I am going to go ahead and say it. I don't care what anybody has to say about it. Robert Downey Jr. should get consideration for an Oscar on this one because his performance was great.
Robert Downey Jr. just is incredible in everything. Before we move on, because I do want to talk about the individual Avengers real quick, the original ones, and where we saw their stories get, and this is a good segue for that. But I did want to point out, Black Panther did have another line, which I thought was a nice callback to Civil War, when Hawkeye and Black Panther got into that little argument, and Hawkeye says, "My name is Clint. I don't care," and they have that fight, and he
arrested. Hey, Clint.
And then when they meet up again here, he's like, Clint. That was a nice touch. But Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, he's the guy that started it all with the line, I am Iron Man. He closes it out with I am Iron Man. Awesome moment. Are you happy with where his story went? Are you happy with how they handled the character?
I am happy with how they handled the character, because what I feel like he did and the way that they handled the movie, they put him face to face with who I believe was one of his biggest demons. He was constantly, in my opinion, fighting with who he wants to be versus who his father was. So for those two to have that interaction, and for him to, really get an idea of how his dad felt about them, because it seems like, based on the films, and even when you look, especially when you look at Civil War and that portion with Barf or whatever, their relationship has been, it was disjointed, So Tony getting the opportunity to have the conversation with his father and see how anxious his dad is about having a kid, and then him having his own child now and being able to look back on some of the things that because he now knows what it's like to be a father. He knows what responsibility there is to both be a father and want to save people. So I think he has a little bit better understanding as to who his dad was. So I thought that they were phenomenal with the arc that he went through from the beginning all the way through this movie. I hated seeing him so skinny.
That was well done. That was well done.
That was phenomenal. Like, that was so great. And then when he rips off the arc reactor and then just falls down to the knees, like, nah, I'm cool. And then completely passes out. Like, you had to understand, this man has been in space now for 28 days. Food has been to a minimum. And it's just, yeah. So I've already said it. He deserves a statue.
I like the moment that he had with his father. And I think it's also kind of apropos that Captain America was also there to see it, since that storyline, especially the connection with the father, was such a impetus to the events of Civil War, which caused their breakup, more or less.
The breakup, yeah.
But speaking of Captain, I agree with you 100%, by the way, Robert Downey Jr. There's really not much I can add. Captain America's ending was bittersweet. I don't think it was very surprising, especially when he saw that he was going to go back in time to return the stones. It wasn't surprising the least bit that he didn't come back, but it's a nice way to end his character. He finally got what he truly wanted throughout all these films. And they didn't really kill him off either, so he's old man Rogers now. But I thought it was a nice way to end his character as well.
No, I agree. I will say I did have a slight conversation with a gas station representative yesterday on my way home, and he told me, he's like, yeah, they killed off Iron Man, they killed off Captain America. And I was like, well, Captain America didn't really die. He was like, no, as soon as he gave that shield up, he died. I'm like, wow.
Oh, see, that's why I said old man Rogers.
Right, old man Rogers. He's another one. I love the storyline, because you go from having this cornbread, run-of-the-mill white dude, who's just sickly, and then he gets this power, and now he is just everything that America wants for their hero. Then, fast forward to the Sokovia Accords that he does not want to sign, him siding with Bucky over Tony, and he's now looked at as a bad guy, right? I'm doing air quotes because you guys can see it. He's a bad guy. But now, so we see he's redeemed himself in everybody's eyes. Him and Tony are on the same page, because Tony told him, I don't trust you. That right there was one of the most powerful lines, and why I said this man deserves some love, because when he said that, I legitimately felt like there was no trust between him and Cap. But Cap earned that back, man. Cap fought, he wielded the hammer, and then he gets to end his storyline with the love of his life, the person that he has just longed for. I'm curious now as to whether or not, how does this work? Does Agent Carter in this dimension know that he kissed her niece in the other dimension? Like, I don't get it.
Hopefully that's as far as they got.
Hopefully
that's as far as they got. I'm Cap's wondering also if, like, the husband that is referenced in the earlier films is really him in the shadows, since they never really speak of her husband. I guess she I think that a big argument that a lot of people will have with the film is, wait a minute, him going back in time screws everything up. Like I said, I'm kind of viewing this as the closing chapter, so it really doesn't bother me too much. I mean,
but it only screws up that timeline. Okay, so if we're looking at this movie, right, when they go back, they're not going back to the main timeline. They're going back to a picture of the main timeline.
And here I feel like if we follow this line of thought, we're just gonna end up in a whole lot of trouble. We're both gonna get headaches, and I for one don't have the medication to deal with it at the moment. But I am going to talk about a doctor that might be able to help here. Hulk. What did you think of the Hulk in this? And I just want to point out that I found it really funny that in Infinity War, for most of the film, except for a couple of minutes, it was basically Bruce Banner, and you saw Hulk for a few minutes. In this film, it's the inverse. Opposite. You have the Hulk, well, Professor Hulk, for the entire film. I only see Bruce Banner for a few minutes. And then Professor Hulk, I think they played it up for comedy a few too many times. It made it a little too cute for my taste. But it wasn't the highlight of the film, but it wasn't a detractor either. I think it was like, okay, well, that's kind of the happy medium to close out his story, or at least start to get that character to a point where he's at peace with himself.
And that you said the major thing, at peace. All these main characters that we're getting ready to go through, I think ultimately, even Iron Man, even Tony dying, I think they were all at peace with the decision.
He can finally rest now.
Absolutely. Bruce is no longer at war with himself to try and be one over the other, feeling like, again, as he said, Hulk was a disease. They are one in the same. So you're absolutely right with the comic relief, though they did try and check to it really early. But I mean, if you think about the film didn't have many laughs prior to him coming on the screen anyway. So he was a breath of fresh air, if you want to say it, whenever he came in. But I'm happy. I'm happy for him. I mean, I hate that, can I say it? I mean, because he's so sad that he tried so hard.
Oh, well, we'll get to that in a moment. But before we get, because that character is kind of like a combo with another character. Before we get to that, I did want to talk about Thor. I will say that if there's I overall, I don't want to sound very negative because I did enjoy the film, but if there's one thing I didn't really like very much about it, it was Thor. I thought that the joke when you first see him and he's out of shape and so forth, okay, it was funny for the moment, but it just kept at it. And it was a joke that just became very, very old with me very, very quickly. And the character kind of became a caricature in a way. And this is a character that really is in a pathetic sense. He is broken, and they play that brokenness for laughs more often than heartbreak. Specifically, I mean, he had a huge weight on his shoulder, and I would have liked to see them explore that a little bit more in a serious sense, but I guess since they were already exploring that with the characters of Captain America and especially Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, that they went for Chris Hemsworth. Chris Hemsworth's one of his greatest strengths is comedy, and I think they relied on that too much in this film.
If I can, I don't necessarily have a problem with the way that they did it, only because in my opinion, the weight that he felt was like extreme. And I think the response that we would have expected to see from Thor in this film, I thought he probably expressed in the first maybe 2 or 3 years. But at this point, whenever we see him super out of shape, looking like the Big Lebowski, it's been 5 years. He's finally gotten used to. He's content with just boozing up all the time. That's just who he was. That was his coping mechanism. Was to make light and be a fun loving guy, because he took it harder. In my opinion, IMO, he took the failure of Infinity War harder than anybody else, because he lost his dad, he lost his mom, he lost his brother, and then he lost his hammer. He went to get another weapon, has to do everything that he has to do to get that weapon, the Thanos killing kind, and then has the opportunity to kill Thanos and went for the heart instead of for the head. And then, so not only did he lose all his people, not only did Thanos kill the people that he killed at the beginning of the film, but he had the opportunity to do the job and he failed. So I can understand why he would go off the deep end the way that he did, and with the way that they did it, with showing his physique. Thor, for the last however many years since the first film, outside of the Marvel Universe included, has been perceived as one of the sexiest men in the world.
He's eye candy, more or less.
Absolutely.
For a certain demographic.
Gamora says in Infinity War that his muscles look like some type of fibers fused together. Like, yo, this dude is
the
not a
pirate
dude.
angel.
You're a dude. This is a man. That's what Drax says. So for him to be the exact opposite, completely gone, let himself go, I'm not even going to lie to you. He gave me courage to do this. I was going to do this show with my shirt off, because I'm like, yo, if he can do it, I can do it.
I don't want to get banned from YouTube, man.
No, I'm saying, yeah, I got to cover these tats up, baby.
I mean, like I said, I think that if to me that it felt at times like they were doing like some sort of sketch for TV, like Saturday Night Live or something. The Big Lethorsky. I would have liked to see a better redemption for him, which is kind of there, but they don't really sell it, and I feel like it's because they're saving him for the next Guardians film, as Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think might be an interesting one. I think it'll be interesting to see. Out of all the characters, he's the character that would fit in that universe the best. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see where they go with him. He's the one dangling thread. And despite the fact that I keep calling this a closing chapter, he's the one dangling thread that I might be excited to see again. But speaking of dangling threads, this is one that was cut short pretty significantly. Black Widow. I thought she was phenomenal in this. up until her demise. A lot of people I've seen online are kind of pissed about it. I guess they're lucky that they sent Hawkeye and Black Widow to get the Soul Stone, because if it was if they had sent like a War Machine and Nebula, that
yeah, it wouldn't have went the same way, because they had no feelings for each other. I originally thought that Tony and Cap were going to end up going after the Soul Stone, because I thought they were going to have a little bit more insight as to what they would need to do, and one of them was going to try and take that responsibility on. But I didn't even think about Black Widow and Ronan going up there. But I will tell you, when I saw that was their assignment, I said that they're the two best people to go, because they legitimately have real true love for one another. Because let's not forget, Natasha's the only person that knew that Clint's family existed. Like, she is the only person that knew, besides Nick, who set it up. Fury, because I am a friend. Besides Fury, Clint was Natasha was the only other person that knew. So I truly believe that the relationship that they had was genuine and love was there. And it goes to the point to show that neither one of them wanted to let the other person go. They fought that tooth and nail, and I'm just sitting there like, wow. And then even when he did it, she shocked him, and I'm like, yeah, okay, she's got it. And then he hit her with the bow, and I'm like, oh, come on. And then she was like, and now, can I say it now? Can I say it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so, Demos, we see her, and she is laying to the left of where Gamora found in Infinity War. If you look at Infinity War again and you see that scene where she's laying on the floor, you see a puddle of red where Natasha's head eventually ends up after this during this film. So what the hell, Demos?
I don't know, man. I mean, this is supposed to take place before all that. The thing that really did stick out to me, the moment I saw that scene, is that you saw blood coming out of her head onto the rock, where my memory of watching the first Infinity War, and I'll have to watch it again and pause that scene to see if Gamora actually, if she was in a puddle of blood herself, because I don't remember much blood from that. But I remember.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But I remember, there was a distinct puddle with her, with Black Widow.
And I think that was on purpose because, again, like I said, I didn't see a lot of blood when Gamora fell either. But then again, I don't know what her chemical makeup is. I don't know how much she bleeds when she bleeds. But what I can say is when you look to the left, you see the puddle. And if it goes to the point or whatever, it's like, okay, whenever something happens, it happens in all timelines. So her busting her head in the main time, I mean, it makes it complicated, but I'm just saying, I looked at the steel, I saw blood where Natasha's head was, and I feel like they showed the blood coming out of her head so profusely in this film because you're supposed to look back and notice that the blood stain is there in Infinity War.
I'll be curious to see if they actually play that up. I think that the way they're going to bring back Gamora specifically is just that other Gamora that from the past, and they'll have to rebuild that relationship between her and Quill. We may even see a love triangle between her, Thor, and Quill in the next film, which I hope they don't do. I don't want to see that. But I do find it kind of funny how many times in these movies they keep setting up Hawkeye to be the guy who dies, and he always manages to survive.
Yep.
Finally, this is the first film that I've seen with Hawkeye where I felt like he was actually important. We actually had a character arc where he had his moments in Ultron, and really just Ultron, really, and a couple moments in Avengers. I'm not saying that he was superfluous in those films, but this is the first film where I felt like he had more that he was much more involved in the plot, probably because his screen time in this is double. Actually, probably his screen time in this movie is probably all his other appearances times 2.
He's the star of this movie.
You think that you go as far as to say as he's the star?
I'm gonna say the reason that I'm gonna say he's the star is because his storyline is the one that we get the most of in this movie.
He opens
the film, right? We see him with his family. We see the snap happen, and then we see how frantic he is. And look, as a father, bitch, let me be at a park and not be able to find my kids. Like that was just one. I'm talking the whole family. God. So that's where we are. Then we don't see him for a while. Then boom, we hear about he's doing this thing, with the cartels. He's Ronin.
Hey, he's a badass, man.
He is a badass. Then she catches him, finding out, a little bit about what's going on with him. We have them go for the Soul Stone, and then she's no longer with us. He's dealing with that pain. He's got to give that information now back to everybody else, and we know how Bruce is going to respond, which he did. But then he's the one who has to get the gauntlet, the Iron Gauntlet. He's the one that has to get it. He's the one that rescues it out. I
was relieved when he gave it over to Black Panther. I'm like, oh jeez. He has a bow and arrow. He has robot women fighting over him. He's samurai swording everybody in sight.
One thing that I want to say about that fight, since I did kind of segue into that, talking about him getting the Iron Gauntlet. The name of the movie is Endgame. The last movie that we saw was Avengers: Infinity War. This was the war that we were expecting in the last movie. What we saw in the last, the epic battle where Ebony Maw and everybody is back and they're going to town, and then you got good guys on one side. That was the war that we expected in the Infinity War. We just got it, a couple hours late.
Or a couple of hours late for them, a couple of years late for everybody else.
Right.
The only other thing I will say is I was relieved to a degree, and I think that everybody had this big fear that Captain Marvel is gonna come in and be the Deus Ex Machina that completely shatters everything they built over the last few years. I didn't really think that was actually going to happen. But I was actually surprised at how little we saw of her in the movie. I will admit, I probably liked her a little bit better in this than I did in her own film. But I think it's also good that we didn't see much of her because she didn't really have a chance to really build in a rapport with this team. And every single time she did appear, she kind of stuck out. Every other character in this film, I was more excited to see Scarlet Witch take on Thanos. I honestly, I will tell you right now, I would have had no problem if Scarlet Witch was the one that took him out either, because of what happened to her and all the losses she's had over the last few films. Thanos was as big of a demon. Yeah. He was as big of a demon to her as he was to Tony Stark.
Very true.
So, I think they handled that pretty well overall. I still think that Infinity War overall was a little bit better streamlined, and it's still amazing how they juggled twice as many characters in that. Endgame, although I think I've mentioned I do have a couple of hangups here and there. I think overall was very satisfying. Definitely seeing the biggest screen that you can. It was a proper close to the saga.
I cannot say anything else, but I will.
Of course.
You are 100% right. That the one thing that I give credit to a phenomenal movie for is the writing, and this movie did a great job with writing. If you go to an action movie and you find yourself holding back tears, they've done a good job, because it's nothing to blow some shit up, right? When you've got the writing to blow stuff up and still have me holding back tears. In Infinity War, it was when Peter Parker disappeared. When he was saying, I don't want to go, I'm scared. That right there did it for me. Getting him back and giving Tony the opportunity to hug, because I think of all the stuff that happened, all the people that died over the course of these movies, I think Tony losing Peter was harder on him than anything else, because he still had Pepper. Now he's got this beautiful little girl, Morgan. Him losing Peter, I think, was a big reason for why he wanted to come back.
Did you notice the kid from Iron Man 3 at the funeral?
And that's the thing that's crazy. I did not. I noticed there was a kid that I couldn't quite place. I was like, who is that?
I was thinking that. I'm like, who the heck is he? I'm like, it can't be him. It has to be him. And I looked it up, and it was. Also liked Jarvis from the Agent Carter show making an appearance too.
Yes. Now that and the voice, everything, and the pleasant man that was sitting beside me, he the light went on for him at about the same time it went for me whenever he says, "Here, Jarvis," and then Jarvis, you hear Jarvis speaking, and he was like, "Oh, that's Jarvis," and I was like, "Yep, that's who Jarvis was based on." So that is awesome. I never watched Agent Carter. I didn't watch it at all. I just knew Jarvis from his relationship with Tony as a AI.
He was one of the best parts about that show, because he and Agent Carter have this partnership that's quite enjoyable to watch. Which also calls back to that show, which creates more friction between her timeline and Captain Rogers' timeline. But I'm not even going to get into that because, like I said, I don't have the medication. There are a lot of nice callbacks. Even down to the point with when Steve is having the fight with himself in 2012 timeline, where he mentions Bucky and the other Captain America goes nuts.
Yeah. No, here's the thing. He's like, I can do this all day. And he's just like, I know, I get it. I mean, that's just, it's funny to me because that was his tagline, and so for him to say it to himself, who's gonna win this battle? Because each of them's gonna say, I could do this all day. Hey, like, come on.
They're time traveling, so they could legitimately do it all
day.
All day. But yeah, overall, I I mean, hell, you've probably already seen it. Let us know in the comments below. What were your thoughts on Avengers Endgame? What do you think of the characters? Are you happy with where the story's closed? Are you anticipating where some of their stories might go? Let us all know in the comments below. Of course, if for any reason you haven't seen it, what the hell? Why are you still here? Subscribe, like this video, and go see it. Make sure you catch us here on Default Assault every single day. We have fun stuff here all the time. TJ, thanks for joining us as always. Where can we find you?
If you're looking for me, I can be found on Twitter at Tokeo J. That's TOKEOJ. Same thing on Snapchat if you want to see how I'm living. Dinner time twice a week with Kyle Nash, a student of the game. Married conversations every week. We got required viewing, who it should have been. We got the content coming for you people. Just thank y'all for listening. God bless. Demos, thank you, man. This was so much fun. I'm seeing it again on Monday morning, by the way. Just want to let you know.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, who is normally here in every episode, couldn't make it because he hasn't seen it yet. He's seeing it tomorrow. So at one point later this week, during one of our episodes, I'm sure that Kyle is going to ring in with his thoughts. And TJ, you having seen it a second time, may have some newer thoughts. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit this week, and yet I'll still be here. I don't know how I'm going to manage it, but I still will be here. You can find me on hilarybydefault.com. Fun stuff every day. On Twitter at defaulthilarity. On Facebook and Instagram, Hilarity by Default. And make sure to like and subscribe and check us out right here where life is hilarious by default.